you ready?
The Rebels are going dancing. That's right, the Ole Miss men's basketball team are headed to the NCAA tournament in 2015. Welcome into our Trotter Road Hospitality Studios here at Town Place Suites, right by the Oxford Conference Center. This is Toddy Hotline. I'm your host, Browning Stubbs, and we have a monumental show today because the Ole Miss men's basketball team, they have done it. After a up and down season, the Rebels, they finished 20-12, but the selection committee thought that their non-conference wins over Cincinnati, Oregon, and Coastal Carolina were just enough to propel Ole Miss into the NCAA tournament. Their opponent, the BYU Cougars, in a play-in game in Dayton, Ohio, which will be on Tuesday at 8:10 Central. So that's where it stands. Ole Miss, they were one of the last four teams in to make the NCAA tournament, and they'll go to Dayton, Ohio, where they actually played earlier this year when they took on the Dayton Flyers in a 78-74 loss. So they return to the University of Dayton Arena, this time with something much bigger to prove. It's an NCAA tournament, a postseason matchup. We'll talk a lot of basketball. We'll also be joined by Jeff Roberson of the Ole Miss Spirit, who will recap the Ole Miss baseball team's weekend in Baton Rouge, where the Rebels won 1 out of 3 games. So stay with us here on Hotty Hotline. And welcome back into Hotty Hotline. And story of the day is the Ole Miss men's basketball team. They are in the NCAA tournament. They're playing Tuesday night against BYU in the Dayton, Ohio area, where Ole Miss, they played there earlier in the season. But before we talk about the BYU Cougars in the matchup, we have to talk about how the Rebels got to this point. So let's do a little recap of the season. Amazingly, Ole Miss makes the NCAA tournament despite 7 home losses, and 3 of those home losses came against teams that didn't even make the NCAA tournament, with Charleston Southern, TCU, Western Kentucky, and then from the SEC, Vanderbilt. If I'm looking at a blank resume and I'm someone on the committee, I have no idea who it is, and I see those losses and I see 7 total, to me that's not an NCAA tournament team. But what helped the Rebels? Well, their non-conference play. They won a huge game on the road in Eugene to knock off the Oregon Ducks back in December. And Oregon, at first it seemed like they weren't playing up to par, but they had a good stretch down the stretch of the season and played good basketball. They made it to the championship game in the Pac-12, while Oregon, they ended up being a very solid seed in the NCAA tournament. Ole Miss beat Cincinnati as well, who also is a good team. They're actually an 8 seed in the tournament this year, so that was also a big win. And then Coastal Carolina, though they are a 16 seed, they were a scary team. They gave Ole Miss a lot of problems. So those wins helped, and also the win at Arkansas was big too, because Ole Miss really dominated that victory in Bud Walton Arena. So when you have a ranked win on the road against a high quality team like Arkansas was, certainly that's going to help you on your resume. And I guess some also good wins for Ole Miss was when they beat Texas A&M. Well, I guess you could say that was their best SEC win at home. For sure, even though they didn't make the tournament. But needless to say, personally, I was shocked that Ole Miss made it, because typically Andy Kennedy's teams have not had luck in the NCAA tournament as far as making the tournament. They've been on the bubble a lot, in the years where Chris Warren was here. He was one of the greatest guards to ever come through the University of Mississippi, and he actually never made the tournament. So that was big that Ole Miss was able to do it this year, and it was just the second time since 2002 that Ole Miss has made it. It was the second time in Andy Kennedy's career, and Also the second time with the three seniors in Ladarius White, Jarvis Summers, and Aaron Jones. So they'll have one more run to make the NCAA tournament. And I actually got the chance to talk to some of the players after their media opportunity when it was announced Ole Miss made the tournament, and Jarvis Summers says, quote, "It means a lot, especially going to the tournament my last year. I just want to go out on top and make something special happen." Well, that's a very encouraging quote. Ole Miss, there's a Vine that you guys should check out all over the internet, and it's when their name is announced that they start celebrating big time. So make sure you check that out as well. But Andy Kennedy, he was relieved that Ole Miss was able to make the NCAA tournament, and it was a rocky year. They go 20-12 on the season, 11-7 in conference play. But let's talk about that last loss. That was last week against South Carolina, where many didn't think Ole Miss would make the tournament despite that bad loss to Frank Martin's Gamecocks. But what happened in the game? Ole Miss really had no control over it whatsoever, and it went down to the wire. Ole Miss was trailing at halftime in that one, but second half, Ole Miss really didn't make a run and didn't actually tie the game up until the final 6 minutes in that one. But let's talk about the drama in that one, because Ole Miss, they throughout the years in men's basketball, there's been some heartbreak. Whether it was Bryce Drew, I hate to bring that up, but the former Valparaiso guard crushed Ole Miss's dreams in the NCAA tournament, making a game-winning shot. That's literally replayed every year on CBS. And also the year where back in 2013 when Marshall Henderson made the tournament, they had a heartbreaking loss to LaSalle when they couldn't make free throws down the stretch. But this game, so let's go through it. So Ole Miss was trailing by 3 in the last one of the last possessions of the game. They were trailing, I think it was 57-54 was the score in that one. So then Jarvis Summers, brings it up the court and makes a pass to Stephon Moody. Moody at the top of the key fakes like he's going to shoot it, but kicks out to Summers in the corner. And Summers had a wide open look for 3. So he drains it right in front of the Ole Miss bench, makes the shot, got fouled, and the game's tied at 57. Summers goes on to make the free throw, and the game was 58-57 Ole Miss. And I was actually in Nashville, and the fans that came were going nuts over that play, and even Marshall Henderson was on the Jumbotron going crazy as well. But then bad news came the last 3 seconds in that one, as South Carolina had a chance to win the game, and they threw it in to Tyrone Johnson, their guard, who dribbled past half court, and he literally just threw up a prayer from beyond the arc, behind the 3-point line, and really his intention was trying to draw the foul. Mission accomplished, Tyrone Johnson, because he drawed the foul. Snoop White, Snoop was making a basketball play, but he got a little too close. There was controversy. Here's why: because it's the last few seconds of a game. You typically don't see a lot of foul calls happen, and sometimes the referees let the players play hard and play a little physical. That's more in the NBA, but there was a little bit of contact. I don't think Snoop was trying to foul him. He was just trying to put his hand up. But what happened was Tyrone Johnson's arms got tangled inside Snoop's arms, and, well, there was contact. So Tyrone Johnson would go on to make 3 free throws for the Gamecocks, giving them the 60-58 victory. Just a heartbreaking loss for Ole Miss. Andy Kennedy seemed like he was crying. Same with Snoop White. But, and actually Snoop said he didn't think that they were a tournament team, which was kind of interesting to say the least. But they were relieved over the weekend as CBS called the Rebels' name out to play in the NCAA tournament. All right, well, we're going to take a break here on Hotty Toddy Hotline, but we'll be right back for much more Ole Miss men's basketball coverage. Stay with us. And we're back on Hotty, Toddy, Hotline, and we're going to continue with our coverage of Ole Miss men's basketball. The Ole Miss Rebels back in the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2013, and it's the second time that Andy Kennedy has coached the Rebels to the tournament, and they get a shot at a really good team, the BYU Cougars. BYU, their biggest win of the season came against a number 2 seed, and that's the Gonzaga Bulldogs, as BYU went on the road to Gonzaga on February 28th and squeaked out a 73-70 victory. So this team can play, and I actually was watching that game. They pretty much controlled the whole game from the start. But see, they're going to be a hard team to play against because they have one of the top 5 scorers in all of college basketball. That player, his name is Tyler Hawes, the 6'5" senior guard, and he's had quite the collegiate career, actually. I've only been familiar with him this season. He averaged 22 points per game on 48% shooting, 35% from 3. So that's going to be a huge matchup for Ole Miss. Actually, his sophomore year, he put up 23 points per game, and then his freshman year put up 22 points per game. So Tyler Hawes is you can't leave this guy open. He's going to play extremely well. In the win over Gonzaga, he actually only scored 10 points in that game, but he's had multiple games this season where he's been in the 30s. Actually, he had a stretch early in the season where he scored over 30 points in 3 of 4 games. So this guy can play, and actually he's actually had only one game where he wasn't in double figures, and that came back on December 23rd against UMass, where he only scored 4 points. So look at that. Keep an eye on Tyler Hawes. Ole Miss has got to contain him. But honestly, the defense has struggled this year with Jarvis Summers and Stephon Moody. Hawes is a bigger guard, so it's going to take good defense from Martavius Newby. It's going to take good defense off the bench from Ladarius White to be able to contain Tyler Hawes. So, and also BYU, they have other solid scorers on their team as well. So Ole Miss can't let down at all. Another key player for BYU is Kyle Collinsworth. He's another 6'6" guard who really does it all on the stat sheet. Puts up 14 points per game, 9 rebounds, and 5.8 assists. So that's a triple-double potential type of player that Ole Miss will have to look out for as well. Tip-off for this one is set for 9:10 Eastern, 8:10 Central Time in Dayton at the University of Dayton Arena. It'll be broadcast on True TV, so it's a tough matchup. I was checking out the Las Vegas odds earlier, and they have BYU as a 2.5-point favorite, and I kind of have to agree because Ole Miss, they've struggled down the stretch, losing 4 out of their last 5, and their one win in that stretch was against Alabama, who just fired Anthony Grant over the weekend too. So I guess Ole Miss played a big factor in the firing of Anthony Grant. But overall, it's just an exciting time for Ole Miss men's basketball. If Ole Miss were to not make it, they probably would have been a 1 seed in the NIT and hosted another game at the Tad Pad. And I think Ole Miss fans are ready to move on from the Tad Smith Coliseum to move into the Pavilion at Ole Miss for next year. But it's a good way to send off the seniors with Aaron Jones, Ladarius White, and Jarvis Summers. That they have one more shot to make something happen at Ole Miss, because they've been one of the most unique groups because they made 2 NCAA tournaments. Andy Kennedy, I was talking to him yesterday about the season, and he said we took a circuitous route to get where we wanted to be. It was certainly not a route that I would have chosen, but ultimately we arrived at our destination. So their destination was to make the NCAA tournament. Mission accomplished, Ole Miss. They have done that. But now let's take a look at what would happen in their bracket if Ole Miss were to advance. So, like I said, they play Tuesday night, but if they advance, they will play the number 6 seed Xavier Musketeers on Thursday at 3:10 Central Time. That game will be in Jacksonville, Florida. And Xavier, the Musketeers, they were seeded pretty high, honestly. They're 21-13. They were 9-9 in the Big East, and it's not like the Big East is like the best conference. So that might be a favorable matchup if Ole Miss can advance, honestly. So some other teams in the West region that Ole Miss is in is the number 1 seed Wisconsin Badgers, the Oregon Ducks, who Ole Miss beat earlier in the season, Arkansas Razorbacks, that they're a 5 seed in the region. North Carolina is a 4 seed, and if Ole Miss was to advance past BYU and Xavier, then they would play probably Baylor, who matched up against Georgia State. So Ole Miss is going to have a tough road ahead, and also Arizona, a team that I like, is a 2 seed. So certainly going to be a tough road for Ole Miss to make it out of the West, but at least they avoid Kentucky. I mean, Ole Miss can play with Kentucky. I think Kentucky has grown tremendously since then. And then they avoid Duke on the other side of the bracket and Villanova, who is a fantastic basketball team. So make sure you follow the Hotty Toddy Hotline Twitter account and check with us on Facebook for updates on the Rebels guide to the NCAA tournament. All right, well, coming up next, we're going to talk some more Ole Miss sports, and you don't want to miss out. Stay with us here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And we're back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're now joined by our special guest of the day, and that's Jeff Roberson of the Ole Miss Spirit. Jeff, what's going on, man?
Oh, just baseball season and basketball postseason and all those good things. Spring football, it's a whole bunch of stuff.
It is, and it's great weather, right?
It is. I love this time of year. I not just from the weather, but that is a positive. But, everybody loves football season, and so do I. But I like it when there's so many sports going on. It kind of keeps you busy and kind of keeps you on your toes. And you got, tennis and golf and track and everything else to kind of keep up with. So it's a fun time of year. I love it.
Oh, yeah, Jeff. And, before we dive into some baseball, I wanted to get your reaction to the Ole Miss basketball team and how they made the NCAA tournament for the second time since Andy Kennedy has been the coach at Ole Miss. So what was your reaction, since they had lost 4 out of their last 5 games?
Yeah, as you kept studying it and keeping up with it and reading about the projections and kind of listening to everything, it looked like they were going to be in or right on the bubble or right there with an opportunity to go. And, I mean, at that point, that's all they could ask for with those 7 home losses, which, if they just cut those down to 4 or something, I think they were in easily. But, as it turned out, great for them, great for the program, great for Ole Miss. I mean, they've I don't want to say struggled, but it's been a long, hard process to put that program on the map again after several years of postseason. And Andy's, finally gotten it going to where it's not 2 out of 3. So that's good. They've been real close in some past years, and we all know that with 20 wins or so just about every year. And he's had a couple of missteps, but as far as, maybe not quite getting there like last season. But really positive for the program, and I know they're excited, and it'll be fun to watch them, see how it goes.
Can't wait to see how the Rebels do in Dayton on Tuesday night against BYU. But, Jeff, you were actually in Baton Rouge over the weekend covering the Ole Miss baseball team as they took on the top-ranked LSU Tigers. And, Jeff, the Rebels, they took 1 out of 3 from LSU, and your tweets were very entertaining to follow, I might add, especially with the win on Saturday. But let's break it down game by game. Can you kind of recap what went on in the first game on Friday?
Yeah, and just generally looking at the whole thing, first of all, as I wrote in my lead to my story on Sunday night before we drove back from Baton Rouge, they had chance to win 2. They didn't have really any chance to win all 3, and they got 1. So they avoided a disaster, which would have been getting swept. And that's not to be negative. I think they went down there, obviously, baseball teams and coaches and players and everybody goes down there to win them all. That's what their mindset should be in any sport. But I think that realistically, I think going against the number 1 team in the nation on the road to open conference play, it's kind of like, I chuckled when I looked at schedules, and we all do that at Ole Miss, I think. You looked at the basketball schedule, when men's basketball, when it came out, your first SEC game is at Kentucky. You look at the football schedule that comes out this fall, you're at Alabama for the first conference game, and then your first SEC baseball weekend is on the road at LSU, so nobody's doing you any schedule favors, so you just go play. And I think getting 1 win down there was absolutely necessity, and just to keep going and stay in the mix even early. And I got a sense from the team and the coaches that they were very pleased to get that win. Saturday night was obviously a lot of fun. But to answer your question, Friday night was an opportunity. I mean, they had a couple of mistakes defensively that cost them a little bit, and couldn't get a key hit or two, which has kind of been a trademark for this team, unfortunately, in the early going, and they've gotten a little better offensively, and I think they would tell you that, but they still are lacking some of those timely hits. And late in the game, they still had an opportunity. I mean, they got J.B. Woodman was on at first. They put Joe Wainhouse in to try to knock it out of the park, basically, because that's what Big Joe does at 6'6", 255, and he struck out and the game was over. But they had opportunities. They lost by 2 runs, so that was kind of your Friday night game. Christian Trent gave you an opportunity to win, and Jacob Wagasback came in and also pitched. So Friday night was a good college baseball game, just didn't quite get it done.
Now, Jeff, Saturday's game, from your Twitter feed, sounded like it was one of the best games that you've ever covered for Ole Miss baseball. But just overall, you've been covering the Rebels 25 plus years. Where did that game rank in the all-time games that you've covered?
Well, as you continue to watch a game like that and as it unfolds, it's like any other game. It's like the Alabama football game this year. Going into it, it's going to probably be a battle and a lot of fun, but is it going to be a classic, and are you going to win and be able to cover a great victory, things like that? You don't really know, and it's over, and then you have, and Sinquest Golson makes the great interception, and, life changes, and it's a great day, and you have fun things to write about. You don't realize that when you're going into a game, but as we watch that game unfold, for example, what we did, and I know I tweeted this a little bit, we sat in the press box during the game, and to beat the massive crowds at all these venues, to get down to do our interviews, you leave at the top of the ninth. So we did that. We sat in the press box for 8 innings, and then headed down toward the field and kind of hung around with the fans, and then Ole Miss tied it up. And for the next 6 innings, we stood among all the LSU fans in the stands. So it was kind of cool and really neat in that regard, and that's a great baseball setting, and obviously one of the best traditions, if not the best in the country, certainly in the modern era. And then just really knowledgeable baseball fans. They were giving Ole Miss some heck. Don't get me wrong. I heard a little bit here and there, but they're really positive baseball fans and supportive. So you're sitting there through all of that, or standing there as we were late, and it was just a lot of fun, and to see it unfold, and Ole Miss be so competitive and just tough it out. It reminded me a lot of last year's team. Saturday night, I saw some glimmer of hope for the team this year from that standpoint, where they toughed it out, and the pitching was there and the defense was there, and then they got the timely hit late, and you were there for a 4-hour plus game, and it was a classic. So, where does it rank? I don't know. I would throw it at it as a regular season deal, probably a top 10 that I've ever covered, maybe a top 5, just from a sheer standpoint of who it was, where it was. They're ranked number 1 in the country in some polls, and, in that setting and the rivalry aspect, just at a team that's growing up for Ole Miss. It was a special night, and something this team can build on, even though Sunday didn't turn out very well.
Ole Miss wins Game 2 of that series 5-3 in 14 innings. And, Jeff, the hero of that game was Sykes Orvis, who knocked in the game-tying and game-winning runs to give Ole Miss the W in that one. So, he kind of been off to a slow start to start the season. But, just kind of talk about where Sykes' his confidence level is right now after the huge victory on Saturday.
Well, I think it's up there, and I think the whole team's is too. But Sykes is, as you said, it hadn't been the best start. you can make reasons or excuses, and they don't do that. But I can list you the things that I see as I go to the games and cover them, and know that it's just tough even for us as reporters. I mean, the weather's been terrible here. To get into a playing frame of mind every game when it's cold or it's not, it's sleet, it's if you're on the road, you go to Central Florida, you go to Louisville. I mean, it's tough to kind of get started and be consistent. And I think you're seeing that, as a Sykes, Orvis, or any of the others, as it comes around a little bit, the weather's warmer. They're kind of getting that routine now, 3 games on the weekend, 1 during the midweek, or maybe 2. And I think you'll see, some of that continue to happen. That's not always the answer, but I think you're seeing that from a veteran like Sykes. And, he made a pretty big statement on Sunday afternoon in the last game down there to just there was a 3-run home run that kind of went over every bleacher in the park and almost over the Intimidator, as they called it, in the right field with all their national championships on it. I mean, they were, the whole crowd that was remaining at the Tiger of the Tiger faithful, they applauded that home run. So, Sykes is coming around, and he's kind of a man on a mission for this season, his senior year. So I think you'll see him really, continue to play well. And defensively, just really, we talked about this on the way home yesterday in the car, underrated, I think, defensively. Sykes does just such a good job at first base that, he's really grown into that. He's played well over there really his whole career when he's been there, and you kind of count on him at first and don't even think about it anymore. So really, a solid college baseball player and the team leader.
And then the Rebels dropped Game 3 of the series, 18-6, Jeff, and the Rebels, they struggled, especially from the mound there with Sam Smith, who allowed 5 runs in the first inning, and he drops to 1-3 on the season. Is Sam kind of, with his struggles, is he, I guess, playing his way out of the rotation? And then my second question is, was Ole Miss, were they just, I guess, fatigued in that game since they played 14 innings the night before?
Well, I think start off with Ole Miss got a run in the top of the first, which is always good. Your pitcher and kind of sets a tone. But they left a couple on the table too. They walked a couple guys. The LSU starter did walked a couple of guys on Sunday and kind of gave Ole Miss a chance to maybe get a couple 3 runs, and that might make a difference. I mean, I know the score was 18-6, but you never know if you jump on them and get 3 runs early, let's say, and it kind of puts them in a hole. But only got 1. They kind of got out of that. LSU was feeling a little better, and then Sam, who has struggled some this year and gives you, has been able to give you 3 or 4 maybe good innings, and then kind of dropped off. This year had really struggled, and it was kind of an odd week for him or any pitcher. He started on the Sunday game against Stetson in Oxford, then he started the Wednesday game at Louisville, then he started the Sunday game at LSU. I mean, that's tough, even though he didn't throw a lot of pitches in any of those. Again, I think some of the routine and things were a little bit affected there, but that was trying to find their way through the pitching staff and also what Sam's role might be. But basically, to answer your question, he struggled, didn't get out of the first inning, and after the game, Coach Bianco said that when we asked him, he said, well, it's 15 minutes after the game. We really hadn't made any decisions for next weekend yet, but we'll evaluate it. I just can't answer that. So it is a work in progress. It will be a week worth of evaluating how do they pitch it Wednesday night against Arkansas Pine Bluff here. Who starts? How many do they use? How does it look for the weekend? You got Friday and Saturday, and then you decide on Sunday. It was TBA this weekend, and then they went with Sam after Saturday night. They told us they would go with Sam again. So, to say he's definitely played his way out or is playing his way out, or where what status will be or who will start, I think those things remain to be seen. But there are some questions there, obviously, and that really put them behind early and set a tone from the mound that they just couldn't overcome.
And Jeff, I'll let you go after this one last question, but let's look forward to what's coming up this weekend as Ole Miss will take on a talented Florida Gators baseball team. They're 18-3 on the season and just took 2 out of 3 from their first conference series against the Tennessee Volunteers. So, what's going to be the storyline for the weekend's series with Florida, and is Ole Miss with kind of how the series went against LSU, are they prepared to think that they can take 2 out of 3 against the Gators?
Well, being at home is probably going to help. I mean, that's historically the case in any sport except for men's basketball at Ole Miss this year. I mean, it's been a little better on the road. But now coming back, I mean, I haven't looked at the polls and really hadn't kept up with them as much recently, but I know that LSU was ranked number 1 in baseball in a poll or two, and Florida was ranked number 1 in another poll or two. So you're dealing with arguably the top 2 teams in not only your conference but in the country back to back. So a tough schedule of Central Florida's and Louisville's and others in the preseason now turns into number 1 LSU, number 1 arguably Florida. And so, the challenges are there, but I think that's what makes SEC baseball and Ole Miss baseball so much fun to cover and exciting for the fans. And, so to really get to the point, I think that they come off of LSU and have some confidence even with the Sunday loss as lopsided as it was. And, they wake up today and their RPI is still top 10 in the country. I mean, it's 9 in one of the RPI polls and 10 in another. So it's strength of schedule is like 2. And, Ole Miss has done everything it could except win a few games more to really be in the mix for, hosting and different things like that. It's real early, and they've got to get better. There's no doubt about that, and the competition's going to continue to be tough. But if they can win, 2 games this weekend, let's say, and take care of business in the non-conference, maybe have a 3 out of 4 week this week, and really set themselves up for late March and early April. I mean, they got a chance to do some things and continue to get better. That's again one of the fun things about covering a team, any team that I've covered is not only just covering them when they are really good and going to Lafayette to win the Super Regional and going to Omaha to the College World Series. But to me, it's a lot of fun to watch a team grow and get better and watch the younger players, grow up and write about them. And so that from my standpoint, it's as exciting or fun to cover this kind of team that is young. And, they had 7 of 9 defensive starters Saturday in that win were freshmen or sophomores. So that gives you a lot of hope for not only this season but the future. So big weekend, be a lot of fun. Weather's looking good.
All right, Jeff, that's great insight from Jeff Roberson of the Ole Miss Spirit. You can follow him on Twitter @SpiritJeff. All right, Jeff, thanks for joining me, man.
Enjoyed it. Thanks.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back on Hotty Toddy Hotline to wrap up today's show. And we're back on Hotty Toddy Hotline, and it wasn't just Ole Miss that was dancing as they were going to the NCAA tournament. There were several other SEC teams that made the NCAA tournament, and we would like to give recognition to them because the SEC, the best conference in America, that we like to think here at Hotty Toddy Hotline, and really improving in basketball. So last year, the SEC only got 3 teams in the tournament with Kentucky, Florida, and Tennessee. And all those teams did really well. Tennessee made the Sweet 16. Florida made the Final Four. And Kentucky, of course, as an 8 seed that year, got to the championship game where they fell to the UConn Huskies. But there's also more success this year from Ole Miss's peers. And Kentucky, obviously, they're 34-0. Number 1 seed for the Kentucky Wildcats. And that's not really a surprise at all. They've won every game. They've been challenged by Ole Miss. That game went to overtime, and they had a tough road games against LSU, Georgia, Texas A&M as well. So Kentucky deserved that 1 seed, and if they run the table, they would be the first team ever to go 40-0. And it's really exciting to have a March Madness where there's an undefeated team, because a team has never gone 40-0, which would be a crazy milestone. Last year, Wichita State, though not many people projected them to win at all, but they were undefeated going into the tournament, but they lost to the same Kentucky team. UNLV back in the 1991 season, they also were undefeated going into the season, the NCAA tournament, but they ended up losing to Duke in the tournament. So let's see some other SEC teams that made it. Number 9 seed LSU. That was kind of a surprise. Many people didn't. Many experts, shall I say, thought that LSU and Ole Miss were pretty much even on the bracket line, LSU, they also stumbled in the SEC tournament, losing to Bruce Pearl's Auburn Tigers. So they ended up, LSU, I guess, surprised a lot of people being ranked number 9. A 10 seed was the Georgia Bulldogs. LSU and Georgia both playing in the same region. They're playing in the East Regional. LSU, they have their matchup against North Carolina State, while Georgia has a really tough matchup against Michigan State, who, I don't know if you guys watched that Big Ten championship game, but they kind of blew that one away. And then the final SEC team that made it was your Ole Miss Rebels. So the Ole Miss men's basketball team, like I said, they were the 11 seed, and I forgot to mention their peer, the Arkansas Razorbacks, also playing in that West Regional. They were a 5 seed, taking on the 12 seed Wofford. So the SEC, I mean, it was a step up this year as far as getting teams into the field, which that they did. They got 5 this year, had 3 last year, and typically the SEC hasn't been the strongest in basketball, but it's good to see it really come alive this year for sure. And you could make an argument that the field isn't as strong this year, but that's just how it worked out. So hopefully the SEC does well and can really get back on track with college basketball, because I think LSU is on the rise. I mean, LSU, they're on the rise with Coach Jones there in Baton Rouge. Bruce Pearl will be doing great things at Auburn. I think Donnie Tyndall, it'll take him some time, but I think he's going to do good things at Tennessee as well. And then, of course, that high school recruit Malik Newman, rumored to have interest in Ole Miss. He's from Jackson, Mississippi, so he's, a top 5 prospect, so that'd be interesting if he were to sign with Ole Miss. So, I mean, there's, the conference as a whole is on the rise, and that's really good to see right now come March Madness time. But make sure you fill out your bracket and see who you have all the way, because it's a fun time. Ole Miss has a very tough matchup though against BYU, so it's not a guarantee that they're going to win. But I would say if they did advance, playing Xavier, who is a little overrated according to the experts, that's a good. I guess that's a good sign. All right, we're gonna come back and wrap up the show with what's coming up this week with Ole Miss Sports. So don't go anywhere. Stay with us here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And we're back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And before we go any further, we'd like to thank the people that make Hotty Toddy Hotline possible, and that's the properties of Charter Road Hospitality. We are doing the show from the Town Place Suites in Oxford, located at 105 Ed Perry Boulevard by the Oxford Conference Center, the newest property that's in the area, and there's a lot of great offers here, and it's a very comfortable place to stay. And actually, I haven't stayed here yet, but I plan on doing it very soon, so make sure you check this place out. Also, right across the street is the Hampton Inn, located at 103 Ed Perry Boulevard, and we were going to do the show there, but the Auburn softball team, who's in town taking on Ole Miss, kind of preoccupied our room where we have done the show there before. But I have stayed there before. Great place. If there's for example, the baseball team plays Florida. If you're looking for a place to stay and you're out of town, make sure you check that out. Now we got to go over to Jackson Avenue over there, located at 110 Heritage Drive, is another Hampton Inn. Great place over there too to stay, and also they offer complimentary breakfast, which I'm always the biggest fan of for sure. And also, right behind it is the Holiday Inn Express at 112 Heritage Drive. So great properties with Charter Road Hospitalities that you guys do not want to miss on if you're in town for any Ole Miss event, Ole Miss sporting event, anything. And I'll give you guys their phone numbers really quick. The one on Jackson, the Hampton Inn, 662-232-2442. The Holiday Inn on Jackson, 662-236-2500. The Hampton Inn by the Conference Center is 662-234-53. Or, excuse me, 662-234-5535. And the Town Place Suites, their phone number is 662-238-3522. It's never too early to get those football reservations for next year, because with LSU coming into town, that's going to be a big home game. But now let's talk about what's coming up this week in Ole Miss sports. Just a reminder again, the Ole Miss men's basketball team plays on Tuesday night, 8:10 Central tip-off against the BYU Cougars in Dayton, Ohio for the play-in game in the NCAA tournament. And the Ole Miss baseball team, they have a home game, which will be against Arkansas Pine Bluff on Wednesday at 6:30 at Swayze Field. But then the Rebels, like we talked with Jeff Roberson earlier, they will take on the Florida Gators this weekend beginning on Monday at 6:30. On Saturday, they have a matinee at 1:30. And Sunday's finale is also a matinee at 1:30. So there's also some other action that's going on around Ole Miss sports, and the Ole Miss softball team on Monday, they take on the Auburn Tigers. And softball also is back in action on Wednesday at 6 p.m. as they'll take on Louisiana Monroe at the Ole Miss softball stadium. Track is also in action in Tuscaloosa on Thursday for the Alabama Relays. The Ole Miss men's golf team is going to Statesboro, Georgia for a tournament there, and then the track team continues their tournament in Alabama as well, and then part of the track team will go to the Rhodes Invitational in Memphis. So there's plenty of Ole Miss sports. Oh, and then we got softball again playing Mississippi State at home on Saturday. That one's at noon. And then women's tennis, they're back in action this Sunday, but they're on the road at South Carolina at noon. So a lot of Ole Miss sports this week, mainly with basketball and baseball. The baseball team taking on a good Florida Gators team, so that's going to be a good one to catch out at Swayze Field. It's great weather. Great 70-degree weather, hopefully, this weekend for some Ole Miss baseball. And the students are back from spring break, so I think they're ready to cheer on their Rebels. But most importantly, the Ole Miss basketball team back in the NCAA tournament. It's going to be great. Hopefully, they'll pull off an upset and make a lot of fans happy in Oxford, Mississippi. Well, that's going to do it for our show this week on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And for our executive producer, John Raw, I'm Browning Stubbs. Thanks for listening. This has been a production of CRM Sports on the Colonel Reb Radio Network.